All right, today we are going to look at some more examples of some addition and subtraction equations. This time we're going to throw some negatives in here and some negative variables and see how we can deal with this. So let's look at example 4. And this one says negative c plus 4.3 equals 5.6. Okay, last time when we were doing practice we saw an addition equation. If there is addition, how do we undo addition? We do the opposite and we subtract. So how are we going to undo or get rid of this plus 4.3? Well, we would subtract 4.3. Plus 4.3 minus 4.3 goes bye-bye, see ya. But whatever we do to one side, we also have to do to the other side. So we also have to subtract 4.3 from this side. Okay, now what was our goal in doing that? What were we trying to do over here? We were trying to get the variable by itself, right? This plus 4.3 was in the way. So we're going to bring down our variable. Now this is different from examples we've had in the past because what's the variable that's there? It's a negative c. We have to bring that whole thing down. So that negative is going to make this a little bit different. Let's see what happens on the right-hand side first. 5.6 minus 4.3. If we lined up those decimal points, 6 minus 3 is 3. 5 minus 4 is 1. 1.3. So, do we have our solution? Do we have c equals something? No, not yet. Not in this case. We still have this negative c. Now, when we're solving for an equation, we don't care what negative c is. We don't care. We want to know what c is equal to. So we have to kind of figure this out. If negative c is 1.3, well, can't we also say negative is the opposite of? So if the opposite of c is 1.3, I'll say that again, the opposite of c is a positive 1.3, somewhere over here on a number line. What would c be? What's the opposite of 1.3? Well, c must be somewhere down here, a negative 1.3. So if the opposite of c is a positive, then c is going to be a negative. So c itself is going to be that negative 1.3. That is going to be our solution. That's what we're looking for. We want to know, is c by itself? Yes. Now when we check it, it's just going to look a little bit different because we are going to plug c in to the original equation way up here. And when we plug it in, what's in front of the c when we're plugging it in? Another negative sign. So when we plug it in, it's going to say negative, and then what c is? Negative 1.3. Move this up. So that's what the plug-in step looks like, and let's just simplify that and then check our check here. Negative, negative, the opposite of a negative becomes the positive. Now notice, here's our question marks. Is 1.3 plus 4.3 equal to 5.6? Here's where we get our calculator. And let's double check and make sure. Use the calculator with the check. Don't let your brain play any tricks on you. Let's see, 5.6. Yes, does that work? Fabulous. So 5.6 equals 5.6. Check. We know our solution was correct then, that c equaled negative 1.3. All right, so now you've seen an example of what to do when you have a negative variable. You've just got to go one step further than we did last time and make the variable positive and figure out that that's going to be the opposite as well. Okay, one more new example of how we can get a negative variable and maybe not even realize it if we're not being careful. I'm going to move this all the way down so you can look at example 5. This one is, I'll put a big star by it, for sure the trickiest thing we've seen yet. Because it doesn't look like it's tricky, but it's got a hidden part to it. This says 3 minus x equals negative 24. Now, when we did subtraction equations before, we would want to undo the subtraction by adding, right? Doing the inverse operation, we would want to add. The problem is that when we did examples before, they would look something like this. X minus 3 equals 24. We were always having a number subtracted from a variable. And so that way, if we added 3 to both sides, the minus 3 would go away and we'd have our variable by itself. The problem is here that people look at this as subtraction and they say, oh, we should add. So we should add 3. But is the 3 the thing that's being subtracted? It's not. So if I added another 3, I would actually just have 3 plus 3 is 6. Did that get rid of the 3 at all? No. So what you need to think about for this is how are we going to get the variable by itself? What do we need to get rid of? This 3 has got to go. It's just a 3 sitting there. How do you get rid of just a 3? How would you take it to 0? Well, to get rid of a 3, I would subtract 3, right? Yeah. So 3 minus 3 is what's going to make this go bye-bye and go away to 0. All right, now let's see what happens with the rest of this, and I'll tell you a couple of other ways to think about this too. So if we did minus 3 on one side, we'd also have to do minus 3 on the other side, yeah? So now let's see what we have. On the right-hand side, negative 24 minus 3 more. Here's where you get to decide, can you think about that as subtraction, or do you need to change that to adding the opposite in your head? Negative 24 minus 3. If you know in your head that that's going to take you down to negative 27, then awesome. If you need to change this subtraction to adding the opposite and think about it as negative 24 plus negative 3 to realize that it goes down to negative 27, then do it. Whatever you need to do. You can still use subtracting as the same as adding the opposite. Negative 27 on the right. On the left, here is where you have to be super careful because we got rid of the 3, but what's left? It used to be a minus x, right? But when you take something out in front of it and there's nothing there anymore, what is it now? It's really a negative x. That whole thing comes down and we get a negative x. And now we have something that's really similar to the situation we had up here above in example 4. Okay, before I go further, I want to go back and show you if you think you might miss that is a negative x right there and you might miss bringing that down, what could you do to this equation right away at the beginning to be able to help you remember that that is really a negative x? It was 3 minus x. Could you change it to adding the opposite? If we had done that, what would it be? 3 plus negative x. Maybe that would help you remember to bring down that negative x also. So you've got a choice as to how you want to think about that. But no matter what, it is going to be a negative x when you bring it down. Now, do you remember how to actually get a solution from this? Because we don't care what negative x is. We want to know what x is. That needs to be our next step. Well, if the opposite of x is negative 27, then isn't x going to be the opposite of that? It's going to be a positive 27. And that's our final solution. Our solution is always what just the variable is. X is by itself. Let's plug it in and see what this looks like. And again, we always plug it back into this original equation right here. You see where I'm getting that from? Okay, 3 minus x, 3 minus, and our x is a 27. Does that equal negative 24? Let's get the calculator. Use the calculator for your checks. I'm going to plug in, let's see, 3 minus 27, negative 24. Absolutely, that gives us negative 24, and we get a check mark. Woohoo! So things to remember for these is when you're looking at an equation, you always need to now look and see, are you subtracting a variable? If that's the case, you're going to have this unique situation where you're bringing down a negative variable. And you always want to ask yourself, is what I'm doing actually getting rid of what's next to the variable? Here, if I had done 3 plus 3, it wouldn't have gone away. I had to think about what do I do to get rid of what's next to the variable. So we're adding in another level of difficulty here, and you guys can do it. We're going to do some practice where not every single one of them is going to be like this, but there's a few that you need to look up for, and you can do it.